concerns you and you learn something and you have information, we'd like you to share it with your neighbors, with your friends, on social media, and in any network that you're a part of, because we are the grassroots. We're the grass and we're the roots. And we're up against a major corporation, and we need a lot of support, and so it's very heartwarming to us to see how many people care and how many show up. And one thing I want to talk about is signs. Of course, we'd love a donation because we have lawyers and things that are helping us. We'd love a donation, but most of all, we'd like you to take a sign tonight, and we'd like you to put it in your neighborhood. That would be very helpful. One of the things I wanted to say is, I don't know how many months ago, but we arranged a fundraiser. It's a riverboat cruise, and we had to cancel it multiple times because of rain. And I've been in the process of trying to reschedule it. It's now going to be scheduled in November. I believe the date's going to be November 9th. So if you have a ticket, unfortunately the riverboat cruise sold out a very long time ago. But if you have a ticket, we're going to be contacting you. And I don't know the time because the time will change by November, and it will have to start earlier, like, whatever, 3:30 or 4, because it'll be getting dark early. So we will be contacting you as soon as we know about that. And I just want to say this is hot off the presses. Last night at the commission meeting, the commission decided that there's going to be a town hall on October 24th. And RYAM was invited to come and present there. And last night the commissioners told us that we could also have 30 minutes to present. So that's very exciting, a very good surprise, that we can really have a town hall that's a complete discussion. So if you have a calendar, please put October 24th on your calendar, and please come to City Hall with us.
What time?
I don't know the time.
6.
What?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Get there early.
Yeah, the seats will fill up as you see, so come early. That would be good, because otherwise we have to stand on the street or the sidewalk or something, and that's, we don't want to do that. We want to be in the room. What else? So our agenda tonight, first up is Tom Budd. Tom lives a stone's throw away from the RYAM facility, and he's the individual who filed the administrative hearing against the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And Tom is going to give us an update on the administrative hearing. And then the next person to be up is going to be Medardo Manzan. And Medardo is a Fernandina resident. He's a chemical engineer who's been delving into the data that RYAM submitted to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So he's been working really hard on assessing the risks that are associated with RYAM's proposal. So we're really glad that he's here tonight. So now, Mr. Tom Budd, please take the microphone.
Thank you. We are delighted that you're here. It's been a while since we got together. The last time was end of May, and a lot has happened. So I'd like to catch you up a little bit on what's transpired and where we are relative to last time we talked. I have a habit of letting this drop, so just tell me if you can't hear. Julie changed our presentation here, so let me get it back. You all know, I think you all know, that there's going to be an administrative hearing. That's basically how I got involved as the petitioner when RYAM applied for their air permit. An air permit for us lay people means permission to pollute. And there's levels that are agreed upon. They will pollute within the levels that are in the permit. So they applied for that in November of 23, and then the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, FDEP, said that they would issue a draft permit. They basically bought the rationale that RYAM submitted, said, okay, we agree, and they said they were going to issue the draft permit. That gave us 14 days as citizens to object. We applied for an extension of time. I believe we got another 30, but whatever it was, we then agreed to file the petition. And for legal reasons, we only used one person, which is me. So and then we were granted the hearing, which was a big step because most of them fail. They don't get granted. And then we had a few rounds of things, but we submitted the petition. It had two main reasons that we believe the permit should be denied. And I need to talk a little bit about what is a win for us. We then amended the petition since we last met. We added 6 more reasons that the permit should be denied. Theoretically, any one of those, should we prevail at the administrative hearing, the judge could, and in my view should, tell FTP they shouldn't issue the permit. But see, that's the thing you have to understand about this. This is a long fight. The way it works in administrative hearing is, it's like a court trial, but you have your hearing. Each side gets to present. We get to question their witnesses. It all comes down to who makes their case. And then the judge asks both sides to submit written examples of what they think his ruling should be. So we basically tout our own horn and say, this is our case, and RYAM's going to do the same thing. And then the judge makes a decision. But that decision isn't the end of it. He's just sending that back to Florida DEP and saying, this is what I think you ought to do. It's still up to Florida DEP. They could, theoretically, the judge could say, they made 8 excellent points, you can't issue this permit, and they could still do it. I don't think that's going to happen. I have more faith in the system. I've been told I'm foolish, but I do have a little bit more faith in the system. So we have to play it as if we can, if we do our job, the others will come our way. But that's when it comes to the city, at some point between now and that point. So what is our win? Our win is that we don't think that there's any chance that the judge is going to say, you can never produce ethanol on Amelia Island, even though that's what we'd like him to say. But that isn't the way the system works. What he's going to say, if it's a win for us, is that they made their case, you skipped too many steps, you need to go back and do a PSD, which is prevention of significant deterioration. That's deterioration of air quality that we all breathe. So that's the win, is that they have to do that study, and in that process we will be able to, because Medardo's going to talk a little bit more about that, so I won't jump too far ahead. But that's our win. And we think we have the case. So that is going to be November 18th to the 20th. We've already been deposed. We deposed Mark Homans. We'll get to that in a couple minutes. You folks probably know that name. He's been here, resident on the islands, worked for RYAM a long time. Was general manager of the plant here until he was promoted to, I think it's Vice President of Special Projects or something like that. And basically, we read that as job description, get the ethanol plant open. So we deposed him, and then RYAM deposed me, and then Medardo, he got the brunt of it. But, and personally, I think after all 3 depositions, I think they're less sure of their position than they were before they deposed us. That could just be me wishful thinking, but I do feel that way. And the new location, unfortunately, we can't do the Atticus Finch thing in the old courthouse because there's another procedure going on there. So it's going to be in the City Hall chambers, November 18th, 19th, and 20th. Other than that, we haven't been given the times when it's going to start, what the rules are for public. We're told that the public can attend, but it's not a huge room, so we'll have to see how that goes. Okay, a couple of other things that I wanted to cover before I turn it over to Medardo. The EPA, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, promulgates the rules for air quality in America. And then, this is a shortened version of how it actually works, and that's to control hazardous air pollutants. They have rules for that. And RYAM emits several hazardous air pollutants. But Florida DEP is in charge of organizing and administering and enforcing those rules. And so even though they're federal rules, this is a state situation, and the state issues the permit. The operating permits are different. That's Title V operating permits, and they have much more federal involvement than the permit that we're challenging right now. So we really do have to get Florida DEP to see, and I'm still hopeful, maybe that's my naivety, but I'm still hopeful that when we present our case, they're going to get a little angry at RYAM because of some of the things that we will be able to prove. And then perhaps they can become the ally of the public that they were designed to be. So that would be nice. Okay, naive, see? Okay, so RYAM has been promising in their approach, their literature, all of their corporate puff pieces, that they're going to, in this process, they're going to lower the pollution levels. Anybody hear that? Yeah. Anybody believe it? Okay, we think it's an inaccurate statement. We're trying to be very careful with our language, stay professional, but I need to go ahead here real quick to the 9th one. Medardo, make sure I stop on 9.
Yeah, keep going. 8.
There we go. Okay. The only reason that they can say that, in my view, with a straight face, that they're going to reduce pollution levels is because they're using 2014-15 as a baseline. And that was before LTF, Lignitech Florida, started operating. So Medardo's going to explain something called single site. It means that for Florida DEP, they have to view the whole property as one polluter and use all of that together for their baselines and their projections and the way that they make their permit applications. Well, they're using 2014 because there's some part of the law that says you can go back 10 years. And that's before LTF even started operating. So if you just think about that, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the common sense test that you could leave out one of the polluting production facilities because you used data that predated its existence. So if they don't use that data, you get this. 21, 22, and 23, there's the actual pollution data that came from RYAM's own annual reports. That's RYAM data. The 4th line, that's the average. Then the 5th line is their projected, PAE, projected actual emissions for when the bioethanol plant and LTF and RYAM are operating. Look at the pollution levels, and this is from their projections in their own application. We used all their own data. If you look at the difference, that's not close. They're massive changes. And that PSD, or again, prevention of significant deterioration, study needs to be done when you hit that threshold. Yet they're telling us that they're going to lower pollution levels. One other thing that I'd like to mention, and then I'm going to stop. My background is, I'm a business guy. I like profit. That's what drives our world. I'm not against business. In fact, I believe that we in this country need a robust industrial sector. It's how we protect our standard of living. I'm not against RYAM as a company. I just think it's lunacy to put it here. And that's what the objection has to be. I don't think we win if we are against business. But we have to be against, in my view, we have to be against where they want to put it. And that leads me to my final point. When I started the nonprofit that we're using to legitimize is how I look at our effort and our fundraising. In the charter, I put that we would be nonpartisan because we're a community advocacy group, and I still believe that way. We are going to be nonpartisan, but we have one issue: no ethanol on Amelia Island, and therefore I'm voting only for those city commission candidates that have stated that they will help us keep ethanol off this island. I hope others feel the same way. Thank you. All right, I'm going to introduce Medardo. He's better at this than I am anyway. Most of you know him, I think, but Medardo Monzon, local resident, chemist, has dedicated hour after hour, week after week, month after month to this effort, and puts me through chemistry class a couple times a week. I haven't flunked yet, but I'm not really ready for it on my own, so I need it.
I see some new faces, so I want to say a few things about me that I consider are important. I have a graduate degree in chemistry. I work in the chemical industry and paper industry for a little bit over 28 years. So I have a full understanding of what goes on at the mill. There are two things that are being said about me because of my views on this project. One is that I'm a fearmonger, and you will get to judge that at the end of this presentation. I am not. The other thing that I want to highlight is I was fortunate enough to work for a chemical company that pioneered how to analyze complex chemical sites for reactivity and accidents and explosion. That kind of curriculum is not taught even today in chemistry curriculum or chemical engineering curriculum. And I would challenge that I don't see anybody at RYAM with that kind of background. And we'll see when the administrative here comes up. The other thing that I heard, and I can go on record because he's on record, from the mayor at the candidate forum, is that the people that were opposed to this are only the people that hate the mills. Let me remind you, 8 years ago, I advocated for Lignotech. So if there are any employees here, which you're welcome, I advocated for Lignotech in front of the City Commission and in front of the Nassau County Commission because there was a reason to do so. The emissions will come down. That's not the case anymore, and I'll proceed with the presentation. I'm going to go back to slide 2. Tom was going to do that, but that's okay. I do want to put in question in front of you, and you be the judge, whether the assertions that RYAM is making are credible or not. Point 1. When Lignotech was being proposed, let me make sure that's number 1. Yeah. a question was asked, in fact, by Julie. Said, will this lead to ethanol production on this island? The answer from the partners, Beauregard and RYAM, was no, in writing. And you see who wrote that letter on behalf of RYAM. The previous general manager, Mark Holmes, on the record, no bioethanol. Now we have a bioethanol proposal. And by the way, the community, the state, and the city awarded tax incentives worth $2.9 million for that to happen, with the understanding that that was the end of it, that ethanol would not be produced. Number two, you will see the relationship a little bit later between RYAM and Lignotech and why that is important to understand. It is important that you understand that for your own health. But what we heard at the deposition and after the deposition from RYAM's lawyers is they have no information about Lignotech, it's a different company, they have no deal with it, and so on and so forth. Well, let me point this out. RYAM owns 45% of Lignotech. I know of no partner who has 45% of an entity and knows nothing about what's going on there. Secondly, RYAM's own general counsel is the secretary, go check on this, is the secretary of Lignotech, of the corporation, since its inception. And in fact, the person who filed the articles of incorporation for Lignotech was, guess who? Mark Holmes. But they know nothing about Lignotech. Lignotech and RYAM are co-located and codependent. So imagine this. Let's suppose you have a neighbor, and the neighbor draws all your electricity from you. Do you think you will notice if they turn the lights off and stop taking electricity from you? Of course. Do you think they will know if you shut down your power generation? Of course. But they claim they don't know anything about what's going on in Lignotech. And RYAM supplies pretty much 90%, maybe more, of the raw materials that Lignotech uses. But they claim they don't know nothing. Okay? They know nothing. Unbelievable. Oh, you won't be able to see the fine print, but I'll read it to you. This, in my view, was outrageous. Mark Holmes went in front of the City Commission September 24th, 2024. And he said, well, we're going to proceed with a construction permit. We expect to apply it in December. And Commissioner Ross, who's here as an individual, asked a question. Is bioethanol considered chemical manufacturing? Which, by the way, is prohibited in the city by our comprehensive plan. You know what the answer was, anybody? No. The answer was no. Well, let me clue you in. What you have on the right-hand side is one of the pages of the permit application filed by RYAM in November of 2023. There's an affidavit there that you cannot read. See that little fine print? By the way, you'll receive if you give your email, you will automatically get copies of this presentation. We didn't do it last time because it was a deposition pending, and our lawyer said don't do that until the deposition. Anyway, what that says, it has an affidavit that says, to the best of my knowledge, the information provided here is accurate and complete, and so on and so forth. That signature is Mark Holmes, who's now going in front of the City Commission and saying something. But it gets better. The other page here is the description of the project. I think you can read that, right? Segment description, can you see it on top? No. Okay, when you get the email, you'll see it. It says chemical manufacturing, ethanol production. But now you go in front of the City Commission and say, no, it's not chemical manufacturing. I don't know what kind of game is being played here. But that's what they're going to try to get, how they're trying to get the permit through, saying, well, it's no violation of the comprehensive plan because there's no chemical manufacturing. I don't know how they're going to explain this, but this is how they're twisting it. Number 4, letter to the news leader from the RYAM's VP of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs. By the way, a chemical engineer. And the case that she makes in that letter is, oh, it's just like You can read it. It's just biological fermentation, it's century-old process, blah, blah, blah. That's how you make beer. That's how you make distilled spirit. Has anybody tried to ignite a beer? No, right? Distilled spirits, you know, when you go to a restaurant and they burn, but it's 40 to 50% alcohol, ethanol. What they will produce is 99.9% alcohol, incredibly flammable, as you'll see later. Besides that, there's no brewery, there's no distillery that produces ethanol in a chemical site which by the government defines as extremely hazardous chemicals. That's what they intend to do. But they're pitching this idea, oh, just like beer. You know, don't worry, just like Mokoma. No, it's not, okay? But that's the party line. Okay. Now, I'm going to apologize up front, but I believe that knowledge is power. And what I try to do in these presentations is to convey to you as best as I can, as simple as I can, what goes on in those two facilities, because I believe it is important for you to know and for you to be able to explain to others. So in very brief terms, please be patient with me. I always said, if you don't like chemistry, it's because you have a bad teacher, and I think I'm a good one. So this is what RYAM does. They put wood chips in a so-called digester, reactor, whatever, and on the right-hand side, you see what's in the wood chips. The few things that I want to highlight, and it's in red up there. Those are hazardous chemicals that are at that site. SO2, highly toxic. Ammonia, same thing. And the purpose of that is to take that lignin, which is the glue that holds the fibers together in the tree, and basically break it down so that the cellulose fibers are released and they can produce their cellulose products. Anybody have a bottle of water? I'm getting fully dry. All right. So what happens then? Thank you, Brent. I am very dry. It's got alcohol in it. Just kidding. Just kidding. I wanted it to have alcohol. So two things come out of it. Okay, the cellulose, which is raw, kind of brownish, like brown bags, and then red liquor, which is their byproduct, which is what they talk about. Okay, and what it happens today is that red liquor, they have two choices. They either burn it because it has a lot of materials that you can burn as a fuel and then make their process more economical, or they send it to Lignotech. That was the whole purpose of Lignotech. Send the red liquor, stop burning, because the red liquor has all that sulfur that they put in to break it. And what happens if you burn a fuel which has a lot of sulfur in it? What do you get out? Anybody? SO2, right? That was why I supported Lignotech. Less burning of red liquor, it gets better. Okay, so why is it important that you understand? So Tom was talking about, well, let me step back on one more thing for you to know. That's chemistry, forget about it, in red. When they do all the process in both sites, you emit three hazardous gases. Carbon monoxide. Anybody has a carbon monoxide detector at home next to the fireplace? Because it'll kill you, right? All right, the silent killer. SO2, the cousin, even worse. And then nitrogen oxides. Okay, so those three things. They are all regulated hazardous air pollutants. Tom already spoke about this, so I'm going to skip it. So here's the interesting thing. Let me back up here a little bit. This is what we originally presented as the objections to the air permit. But what caught our eyes is there was a footnote in those annual reports that we had to review in a hurry to be able to get that petition in front of the authorities. So once the petition was in, we noticed that footnote and said, what's in it? And it said, RYAM and Lignotech need to report their air emissions data together. So that prompted us to go back and check the air permits for Lignotech back to 2016. And then we found something really interesting that you need to know because it will impact your health. Tom already alluded to it. And what FDEP determined is right there in the middle. The SUV facilities will be considered a single source for permitting purposes. What does that mean? It means that if you do a modification at RYAM, you need to document how that will impact Lignotech, and vice versa. Okay, got it? Okay. And up to now, we've only been talking about bioethanol RYAM. Mistake. Why? I've underlined the initials at the top, PM. Anybody know what that is, PM? Particulate matter, another word for chemical dust. Okay? So here it is. When Lignotech was first proposed, 2016, this was not mentioned. It was not mentioned to me. They applied for the permit. Lignotech triggered a PSD review. I'll get into why that's important. One of the reasons why it's important is because it requires the facility to implement what is called best available control technology, to be able to control the emissions. Okay? It's in the regulations. It's a mandate. You have to do that to maintain all of us healthy. Guess what happened? The equipment failed. The equipment failed. And Lignotech then was obligated to go to the FDEP and request for an exception to pollute, to increase their emissions of particulate matter by 2.5 times, to this day. To this day. So let me ask you something. If you send more red liquor to Lignotech, what's going to happen with particulate matter emissions? They're going to what? They're going to go. It's not included in the air permit. And there's an assertion in that air permit that is technically flawed, and we're ready to prove it in the administrative hearing. And the assertion that is in the air permit, which FDP accepted, basically taking RYAM's word, it says, there will be modifications in the chemical and physical properties of the red liquor. However, when it goes to Lignotech, nothing is going to happen. And it gets more complicated now. If you go to the public hearing, you'll hear the explanation. That is absolutely known. So all those arguments then went back and said, wait a minute. The air permit is not analyzing the impact of the project on the single site like FDP requires since back to 2016. Okay? And I know Tom, friend Tom, since I first met him, he's complaining about all this dust that comes to his house. And we haven't tested it for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot of that dust that comes from Lignotech. We don't know for sure. All right, a little bit on the PSD. What is that? And we know from RYAM's data that Tom shows that their own data, not ours, not my calculations, not anybody else, RYAM's own data shows that the emissions are going to go up. And that requires a PSD review. A PSD review then requires the installation of best available control technology if they ever do this project. But number two, it has to be based on that single site. When they put Lignotech, the old site doesn't exist anymore. That's why they cannot go back to 2014 data. Lignotech started in 2018. The new site is 2018. It's Lignotech and RYAM, and they have to use the data that Tom was sharing. That is the new site. Number two, it requires an additional impact analysis, water and soil. We will get to demonstrate at the administrative hearing that there's no way that they achieve the production of 7.5 million gallons of ethanol unless they use genetically modified yeast strains, which are not mentioned in the air permit, and there's no discussion of how they're going to dispose it and how it might impact our environment. Okay? And we will get to demonstrate that either they back off on the quantity that they're going to produce, or they'll have to admit, as they already indicated to us in their answers, they will have to use genetically modified strain. There's no way about it. And there's a technical explanation for that. But last but not least, important to all of us, before the permit gets issued, it requires public involvement before that final step. There's one more thing that I will mention later that is very important, and I'll circle back. As a professionally trained chemist who worked in two of the largest chemical complexes in the United States, Midland, Michigan, and Lake Jackson, Texas, an air permit should not be enough to allow a construction permit of a chemical site. You need to do a risk management plan of what will happen if there's an accident. And the intention here is, well, if you just get an air permit, as the city commission has said, well, we just proceed and give them a construction permit. Insane, absolutely insane. You have to analyze what are the hazards, and we'll go over them in a few minutes. We already talked about this. This is what Lignotech does. They produce solid materials, it's more particular matter, etc. So I'm going to skip this unless somebody wants to explore this further. We can go back in the question and
I
answer.
have a question.
Yes,
You just mentioned the 2014 data. It has nothing to do with this slide.
correct.
On the slides that Tom showed, it started 21, and that's when they became Lignotech and RYAM, correct?
Correct.
So they were comparing the data not against the 2014 data, which I imagine is a lot higher, and they've already lowered it to when they joined forces. So then they were trying to show a greater or a lesser increase. I'm not quite sure, but I understand from the first meeting, there was some, I don't want to say fraud, but they were playing games. They were comparing it against 14 data.
Correct.
That showed a reduction.
Exactly.
And you didn't show it on the slide.
No.
I was looking for that point, I didn't see it.
No, but you're right. In the permit, their baseline emission is the 2014 data. Okay? Now, this will be an argument at the public hearing. The words that are used in the report that RYAM files to FEP, here are the words: annual actual emissions, actual 2021, actual 2022, actual 2023. If you look at the Webster Dictionary, actual has a meaning. It's factual. It's what's going on now, right? So if the emissions are going to increase or decrease, they're based on what happens to what's occurring now. You're not going to agree more or less based on what was happening in 2014, right? So that's what the comparison needs to be. That's an argument, but it's based on the single site determination made by FEP back in 2016. So thank you for
Wouldn't
that.
the FDP be upset that they used the wrong baseline?
We would expect them to be.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so let's move on. Okay. I already mentioned this, the so-called fermentation. Well, just so everybody understands what they intend to do. The red liquor has those components: lignosulfonates, which is what Lignotech produces and sells. It also has 20% sugars, and that's what they say they're going to ferment, just like beer. Okay? And they have admitted, as I said before, that when the red liquor gets modified and gets sent back to Lignotech, after fermentation, the properties would change. And as I've stated before, that's a big deal, because it will change the particulate matter emissions. And I'm going to skip that. All right, so back on hazards and risks. So that's ethanol, highly flammable. It forms explosive mixtures with air, and it has a higher flammable range than gasoline. So it's more flammable in a range, 4.3% to 19% per volume, it will ignite more than gasoline. Okay? And it also has, to me this is a concern, a facility like that, the vapor density is higher than air. So what happens if you have a leak in a tank? Where is the gas, the ethanol going to go? Up or down? Down. And it's going to propagate, right? And can you see clouds of ethanol? No. Okay. All right. RYAM already processes very large quantities, 8,000 pounds, 10,000 pounds, they have 8,000 gallon tanks and so forth of these materials. These are not my words. These are the regulatory classification of those chemicals. Extremely hazardous chemicals. That happens today, and admittedly, they have done a good job today. Facilities like that are subject to a risk management program. Okay? And they need to include, this is a review, I already spoke about this, but I want to repeat what I said last time because this is a big deal to the community. They need to report the potential effects of an accidental release of all these chemicals. Okay? A worst case scenario, such as would happen if perhaps Milton would have come straight here.
Oh, God,
Okay. Never happens.
it would be bad.
And also an alternate case scenario. This is one of the slides that I presented last time and then I was accused of being a fearmonger. This is their data. This is from the report that they file with the regulatory agencies. And what does it say? I already told you they have ammonia, chlorine, chlorine dioxide, and sulfur dioxide in their facilities, right? They have it there. And in their analysis, it says, in a worst case scenario, a cloud will dissipate that would be as large as, and this is in miles. Can anybody read chlorine? How big that cloud would be? 14 miles. That's probably what, I-95? Heckscher? Oyster Bay? Okay. Now, worst case scenario. Okay? Maybe it never happened. Hope not. But also in the report is this so-called alternative scenario, which I call run-of-the-mill accident. This is what it says. RYAM words, not mine. Okay? They have a tank with chlorine dioxide, number 3 here. And they have an 8-inch pipe attached to that tank. There's a gasket between the pipe and the tank. It's a 1/8 of an inch rubber gasket. If that fails, it takes them about 30 minutes to figure out that the leak exists. The cloud will propagate nearly a mile, 0.9 miles. Based on census data of this report, which is sold, I don't have the exact date because it's not published, it will impact about 400 people downtown. Okay. All that is based on individual leaks of each of these chemicals, not under a fire, which is my biggest concern. You put bioethanol here, highly flammable material, you have a fire, what in the heck is going to happen with this mixture of chemicals that already exist there? That's where I see the highest risk for this community.
Bernardo, on that slide right there, that they're saying the people that are affected, that's not even including the people that work there.
Absolutely.
They're trying to base that on the people that are closest that live there.
Good point. Plus 200 people that work there.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, add the numbers.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Marion. Yeah. But they will tell you that accidents cannot happen. I showed this last time, I'm showing it again. They had a fire at a similar facility in their plant in France 2 years ago. When you get this, please go to that site. Don't believe me. It's in French. Use Google Translate and you read it. 23 firemen and 6 security officers were required to put this fire. Fortunately, it didn't get to those tanks. Do we have 23 firemen in here? No. 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 Okay. So, and now the proposal is to add a flammable solvent in a site that already has all these chemicals, and if you have a fire, who is going to come? But it's not going to happen, right? Accidents won't happen. Oh, I will take great pride on this slide, I'll tell you why in a minute. This is what I presented back in May, I think it was, or March, whenever the previous town hall. And I said, look, under a fire, this is what can be produced. Ammonia can react with chlorine explosively and produce a chemical chloramine, highly toxic. Carbon monoxide and chlorine can produce phosgene, more lethal than mustard gas. Okay. Chlorine dioxide and hydrogen chloride produce muriatic acid. Anybody here own a pool? Okay. I don't suggest it, but if you don't believe me, do this experiment. Go to Pinch a Penny, buy a gallon of muriatic acid, put a dot on your skin, and then you tell me what happens. Okay. Please don't do it. But that's what would happen in a fire. Okay? And then you will be breathing clouds of hydrogen chloride. This is not real fear mongering. This is real. These are things that can happen in that facility. Now, why am I saying that I feel proud of this? So you probably heard about this, right? Just a couple of weeks ago. Chlorine-based materials, not as large as RYAM, and they have a chemical fire. Won't get into the details, but a sprinkler failed, water fell into some chemicals that react with water, and boom, 17,000 people were evacuated. Now just imagine this. We're here, something happens at RYAM, and we have to evacuate. How do you get the population out of this island when, by the way, the fumes are probably over the bridge and shut it down?
That's right.
How do we get off this island? Impossible. Not only that, you could hardly read there, 90,000 residents were sheltered in place. The fumes reach as far as Atlanta suburbs, 20 miles away. They couldn't open their windows. They couldn't open the doors. Turn your AC off because you don't want to suck all this air into your homes. Is that what we want to be exposed to in this facility, in this community? I say no. Now, why do I feel proud? Read this, you can't read it now, but when you get it, read it. You know what EPA is testing in that fire? Chloramine, phosgene, hydrochloric acid, and of course chlorine. I'm not making this up. This is what happens in a chemical fire when you have those chemicals. When did this happen? September 29th, almost 15 days ago. But it can't happen here. It can't happen here. And besides, they didn't have a bioethanol plant in that facility, did they? No. And of course, you probably heard about this as well. Second RYAM plant with a fire. There's very limited information. I don't want to speculate. All that I've read is one of the reactors caught fire, which I find pretty unusual. But it caught fire, that's all I could find out so far. But here's what I found interesting. The fire units that responded came back from Hinesville, 26 miles away. And Brunswick. Like from Jacksonville, maybe? So what happens between now and then? You know, fire crews from where? If we have an accident here. When you review chemical accidents, when the accident gets so complex, there's one solution. You walk away. Or you send your first responders in a suicide mission to try to control it. Or you just let it burn like they did at Converse, Georgia, until everything takes its course and you're done. Okay? That's what it is. So, neighbors, friends, you know, that are here, I have been deposed. I put my hand on the Bible and sworn that what I said is true. It is factual. And I will make the same arguments. We will not get into the hazards because that's not part of the air permit, which is sad. But what I will say is, the air permit application that was submitted for RYAM is incomplete and inaccurate on 8 points. 8 solid points that do not allow them, a regulatory agency, to properly assess the environmental impact of the bioethanol project. And until that gets done, the project needs to be denied. Okay? Because if the role of FDEP is to issue permits based on an evaluation of the emissions of hazardous pollutants, and the application is inaccurate and incomplete, how can you provide a permit? Those are our arguments. I don't know if you have any questions or observations, but I'm done for now. And one, two, for the gentleman here. Yes.
Just a quick question. Assuming the RYAM and the lawyers know what you know, who knows, how will they possibly defend their position? Or what do you think they'll do to continue to cheat?
Again, purposely, I never use those words. I only say the application is inaccurate and insufficient. Now, that is what's going to get argued in the public hearing. They're going to say the data is correct because A, B, and C, and we're ready to show that that is not the case. That the data is inaccurate, that the data is insufficient, that the data is incomplete. And that's going to be the back and forth with RYAM's experts, Mark Holmans, David Rogers, the two consulting people that signed the application and so on. The lady had a question.
I wanted to answer something else to this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll give it right back to you. So there's one other component answer to your question. At least through the deposition and the interrogatories, that's just questions that we ask back and forth of each other, trying to understand each other's case. They basically have said that either they don't know anything about what happens at Lignitech, or it's proprietary, confidential information, and we can't, we'll blow ourselves up if we tell you. So, and I think that some of that's going to come in the hearing too, that they're going to dodge behind that. They're trying to get a protection order through the judge right now for some of their data. So I think they're going to hide behind, we've told Florida DEP what we can tell them, and they bought it. So they're going to rely on it.
Good. Thank you, Tom. Let me take the microphone.
I have a couple of questions. The first one regards your slide about how far the pollution would travel if based on certain counts. Is that in a linear or is that in a circumference?
More like a circumference.
Okay. All right. That's my first question. My second question.
And of course, it depends on how the wind is blowing, which is by having a conversation right? They were sheltered in place and the wind shifted and they said, you can't go. No, you can't go because the wind shifted again. So it depends.
I understand that. What I'm trying to get straight in my head, when you say 14 miles, and I hear people say to 95, but would that also go into Georgia? Would that also? Okay, so I kind of want to get a picture in my head that this is actually a cloud that's going to radiate out in all directions, depending on the wind. Okay. My second question, you are approaching this as a protest to the air pollution because that's what they're asking for now, air pollution permit. And I understand the machinations that go into this kind of a request. What is the next step after the air pollution? Does EPA or Florida DPA, do they request some kind of water effect? Do they request soil? Do they request impact of clean water? Because I'm sure, certainly this does not run without using potable water. So that's one thing. So one of my questions, what's next? And I have some other ones.
So what's next? I mentioned before, it is an integral part of the PSD review. And as a minimum, we need to get that, because it is insane to get an approval without getting a PSD review. The other thing that I will not have time to talk about, but if you want, we can have it on the phone, there are laws that protect us, and the city commission has ignored them. It's called the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. And it requires local government to get involved when you have a project like this, to work with the emergency planning agency to make sure that the facility is safe for the community. That is not happening. I've gone 3 times in front of the city commission to remind them, and actually have said, you are derelict in your duties by not complying with the federal emergency planning community to know that. More questions? Yes.
I comment, I'm a research scientist, trained PhD, trained research scientist, and we haven't even scratched the surface of the cancer cluster aspect of this. They're wrapping up a bow on their plants and putting a cancer cluster producer in our neighborhood. Half a block or 2 miles.
You
And
know better than I.
with predisposition to get cancer, my mom died of lymphoma, environmentally cancer, my 2-year-old son had chemo, environmentally cancer. I mean, there's many aspects we can go in this for.
Take one more question, and we could take it for a long time. We'll take one more question.
I just want to clarify, so if the danger is 14 miles wide, is maximum 14 miles long and 0.9 miles wide, that's almost our whole island, which is 2 miles by 14. And then my other question is, like, do we have 40,000 residents or 60? So our entire island
Yes.
is affected.
Yes.
And our entire island is devastated.
This is an issue that Pamela and me and many others believe. This is not a city of Fernandina Beach issue. But the permit will go in front of the city commission. So hopefully we will have time to talk to other island residents and make them aware of what's going on, because it will impact them. By the way, just a clarification, it wasn't 0.9 miles wide. It is the plain vanilla accident is 0.9 miles radius. Okay, so that is it. So I'm gonna.
I have a quick land development code. The city commission went out and got outside counsel, spent money, our money doing that. That outside counsel came back and said it's against the land development code.
Yes.
Isn't that I mean, what happened to that cut and dry, black and white?
I'm going to hand it over back to Tom, but I want to say one more thing. I have been supporting this effort from the beginning, but I am not an official member of No Ethanol Fernandina. That is an organization that has officers and so forth, Tom and others, and I am not part of it. Okay? So I'm stating what I'm an expert witness in this case, what my opinions are as a expert in the chemical industry. So I'm free to say what I am going to say. Okay.